First of all, just to apologise for being late to the debate, but we're at a protest outside about the cost of living. And I want to thank the Labour Party for bringing forward this important motion. On a personal level, I am very, very grateful to grassroots football for the role it certainly played in my life in instilling certain disciplines or experience and education about, you know, the importance of working together with other people, team discipline, comradeship, and being part of a community, and also just about having fun and mixing with people from all sorts of backgrounds. And I want to thank all the clubs that I played for, the very many clubs I played for in Dunleary, Cabinteely, who had only just started out then, but now have grown to much bigger and better things, to St. Joseph's Boys, who I played for many years, to Ballybrack FC, and then later for clubs like St. Joseph's Glasstool and Dunedin, UCD. That's probably not the full list, but many, many clubs. And I owe every single one of them a great debt for particularly what the unpaid volunteers did. And I note in the FAI report that, you know, the number of these people is just extraordinary. 45,000 people registered as volunteers who, for absolutely no personal gain, are out working with young people, mostly inspired by the belief that if you don't give young people something positive to do, they can end up getting in trouble. But if they learn how to play football and engage in that positive team sport, that is going to stand to them for the rest of their lives. And there's absolutely no doubt that that's true. Setting aside even, and we all think it's important that the Irish team do well, or League of Ireland teams do well, or we celebrate the fact that some players may make it to, you know, higher levels of football in the English Premiership or English leagues or internationally, but just what it does for every single young person who gets involved in grassroots football, and what it does for communities. And there should be no end of thanks to all of those volunteers for what they do and the contribution it makes, particularly to working class communities and to disadvantaged communities, and indeed to the integration of communities, the cohesion of communities, and teaching people life skills that will stand to them for the rest of their lives. But the problem is that our society, our government, well maybe specifically, not our society, our governments, successive governments, have failed to put the investment in necessary. Because in every single one of the teams I could mention, and I'm going to mention a few others, the question of facilities or lack of has always been an issue. Lack of pitches, lack of changing rooms, lack of showers, lack of financial resources. They always have been and remain a major issue, and even more so now when there's an absolute explosion, certainly in my area, and I think others have testified to this, there's an explosion in interest in grassroots soccer, and obviously the flourishing of women's soccer and girls' soccer is absolutely extraordinary, but it is not even remotely closely matched with the level of support, investment, resources, facilities that are necessary to accommodate those teams and to ensure that they flourish and reach their capacity. And I just want to name check a few in our area in that regard. And recommend indeed that the Minister watch the story of Pearse Rovers. Pearse Rovers were set up in the 1950s. They essentially grew up with the area of Sallynoggin, a working class area. Since Paul McGrath started, one of our greatest footballers, started with Pearse Rovers. To this day, they have never had a decent facility. For years, they were in literally a tin can in Sallynoggin Park, right? A tin can. I changed it myself when playing against them as a young person. And they are still fighting to have their own dedicated facility. They have raised all the money necessary. They're working with about 10 other community and sports organisations they're willing to share the facility with, but at every single turn there's difficulties. There's always a difficulty, there's a blockage, rather than a proactive effort to support them, to resource them. There's always reasons why you can't do things, and it's just not on. So I really ask that we start to have a proactive response. I mean, they do, as well as the football. They recently were raising money for somebody in the community who had a bad brain injury, who had family members in the team. They do mental health days 4 or 5 times a year. So they're at so many levels they are contributing to the community. Another team that were into us recently, Granada, in the Blackrock area, they now have gone from 500 boys and girls 5 years ago to 1,300 boys and girls in the last 5 years. They have a dedicated team for kids with disabilities. They have a dedicated team for kids with dyspraxia and autism. They used to have 3 mixed teams, now they have 20 girls teams. But right now, as we speak, in the coming season, they don't have a pitch. They have some pitches that are being redone, and they welcome that. But for the next 18 months, while those pitches are being redone, they are having to beg, borrow and steal pitch space from other clubs who don't really have it either, right? Because there's not enough pitches. And this is a problem that is replicated with club after club. Park Celtic, another team in Cabinteely, don't have changing rooms that can facilitate women players in particular, girls in terms of the facilities. Carrigley Football Club in Monkstown Farm, lack of pitches and facilities and resources, and you could go on through the list. Right, and when I looked just before I came into this debate, I looked at the comparison of expenditure on sport generally in Ireland versus countries in the rest of Europe. We are at the bottom of the league table, at the bottom of the league table, by a very considerable margin in the amount of resources we are putting in to sport generally. And undoubtedly, soccer is one of the poor relations. I could add amateur boxing. And there is a connection between the most poorly resourced often are the ones that are in working class communities and disadvantaged communities. We have to address that. How can we expect, you know, at the higher level for football to thrive if we don't nourish, feed, resource, facilitate the grassroots, particularly where there's an explosion of interest of girls and boys, men and women in these sports, enormous potential, but the state has to come up to the mark in terms of providing the resources that are necessary. I note even in the last budget we actually cut by about 10 million the amount of money going into sports in the last budget, from 181 to 174 in sports.
To the region.
Well,
thank you, Deputy.
We need to invest.
The Regional Independent Group.